Welcome to the Desert Sanctuary with Carl and Laura Forehand.
Often when we have doubts about religion or simply want to ask questions, it can feel like we are wandering out into the desert.
We would like to invite you to join our sanctuary, the Desert Sanctuary.
We've tried to pick guests that would resonate with and challenge us and our fellow seekers here in the desert.
We believe that a key to the journey is to keep asking good questions, and we believe that all stories are sacred.
Our hope is that you will find life and healing for your body and mind, and that you will be able to be where you are and be who you are.
And now, here is our show. Hi, welcome to the Desert Sanctuary podcast. I'm Laura Forehand, here with Carl Forehand, and we are continuing our podcast series on Carl's new book, Campfires in the Desert, a deconstruction travel guide, and we are on, I think, chapter 5. Now I've lost the number. You don't actually have these numbered,
not actually numbered.
But anyway, this chapter is titled Learn to Be Who You Are, Authenticity. So, kind of wanted to start with like a big general overall question of what does authenticity mean to you?
Yeah, and I should say, my second book was called The Tea Shop, about our experience in Taiwan. And as we had that experience and we're kind of learning about two things, presence and authenticity. But I remember it was about that time that I turned 50, somewhere in there. And when I turned 50, I got a tattoo on my, that is the Taiwanese, the Mandarin for authenticity, for real. It's being real. And so at that time, when I got that tattoo, I was also reading Richard Rohr's book, Falling Upward. And I wanted to, the first half of your life's about ego and careers and identity and those kind of things. Well, then the second half of my life, I was kind of purposing myself to be real, to be authentic, not to be what someone else wanted me to be, or not this identity that I created, but just to be real, to speak honestly, to um, live kind of, I don't know the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
To live authentically.
Yeah.
But I found that word from our son that's in Taiwan, and someone else I consulted with over there. I just wanted to be real for the rest of my life. So for the second half of my life. And the best word I can come up with is authenticity. So it's being who you are. That kind of coincided with deconstruction, where in deconstruction, the biggest question that comes up immediately is, who am I? Right? So what's my identity and so as we're discovering that, we're starting to learn about, well, when I know who I am, then I can be who I am. And to me, that's authenticity.
Yeah, and that takes some questioning of yourself. You have some questions in this chapter. And I'm guessing we have to sit in kind of a reflective state of these questions. So like, who am I? What do I like to do? What do I believe? How should I act? What are the rules? And how do I set boundaries? And some of those seem, at first you might go, well, what do I like to do? It seems maybe like a simplistic question, but you really have to sit with yourself and kind of dig deep because, you know, are the things that you've been doing what you truly like to do, or is it something that someone's told you that, if you're going to be part of this group, you have to do these things?
Yeah, Western religion certainly does, I would say, in my opinion. It certainly takes away your identity because we even had language like that, Well, first of all, we're Christians, right? We're Jesus followers. We're Baptists, or we're Catholic, or we're whatever. And we're expected to conform to that identity. If we don't, you might find yourself kind of pushed away or ignored.
Mm-hmm.
if you're not conforming to the group. And they
Right.
actively talked about conforming. That's why people have vacation Bible schools and summer camps for churches,
Mm-hmm.
is so that you'll understand what they believe so that you can be like them. Well,
Almost like this is our agenda
yeah,
kind of
what do I
thing.
do with, but it involves what do I do with my time? Who am I? What's important to me? All those things
Mm-hmm.
kind of come up in that conversation. And we realize when you step back from religion, that's what you kind of miss at first was I knew what was expected to
Mm-hmm.
some degree. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
always talk about them changing the rules, and they
Right.
do.
Right.
But when they change the rules, they expect you to conform to those new rules as
Mm-hmm.
well as the old ones.
Right.
And wherever they're going, you're expected to be pretty close to that. If you're a little bit off, then you're in trouble. So
Mm-hmm.
coming out of religion, saying, I think I'm done with the religion, it immediately gives us an identity
Mm-hmm.
crisis. And we don't, nobody's telling us what to do, where to go,
What to
where to
believe.
be, what to believe, how to think, and all
Mm-hmm.
that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
They claim they don't do that, but they do.
Mm-hmm.
And only people that have kind of stepped back from it and get some perspective can accurately talk about that.
Right.
It's
Right.
hard to see when you're inside.
Right. So you mentioned Richard Rohr's book, Falling Upward, and you mentioned the two halves of life. And so do you think it's that ego part, that first half of life, do you think that's essential? I mean, it seems like
Mhm.
everybody kind of goes through that, and then whether you want to call it a midlife crisis or deconstruction
Mhm.
or, whatever,
Whatever.
then we transition to this second half of life. But is that first ego part, is that essential
I
in your
think it
opinion, I
I
guess?
think it is. I think there's, Richard Rohr probably does a better job of explaining that than me, but he seemed to think it kind of was, that it's what we do. In a sense, we're trying to discover who we are.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, it gets hijacked. If we could have been authentic from the beginning, that would be great. But
Mm-hmm.
but we set out to discover who we are, and then people tell us what we are, and they want us to join systems that kind of rob us of who we are. So we end up, at a midlife crisis saying, well, I'm a Baptist, I'm a carpenter, I'm
Mm-hmm.
a plumber, I'm important in my community, I'm a leader, I'm not a leader, and we have that. I think you kind of have to have that to come to the crisis of faith or the dark night or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So in the middle is that time of reckoning. It's like, am I really going to follow this for the next half? And it doesn't have to be at age 40 something or
Mm-hmm.
50 or whatever. It could be early in life that you make that
Mm-hmm.
discovery. But I believe those two halves kind of have to be there. You have to kind of strike out on your own and realize what works and what doesn't
Mm-hmm.
work and who you are. And then when you realize you're being what do you do when you realize halfway through someone else has decided all these things for me?
Mm-hmm.
They've told me what to believe, they've told me what to do, they told me who I am,
Right.
and so on. So I think you kind of have to go through it. You don't have to, it doesn't have to take 50 years,
Right.
but growing up, you kind of have to establish yourself. That ego needs to kind of be in place, and then you're going to deal with it. It's going to be
Mm-hmm.
hard and difficult,
Mm-hmm.
but then you can start living the second half of your
Mm-hmm.
life.
Yeah. You talk about fitting in, and I know we've talked about this before, but I'm wondering if you could kind of just recap. First of all, what is fitting into you? And then secondly, how is that different from having a sense of belonging?
Yeah, so maybe real simply, fitting in is being who they think you should be. Um, Authenticity is being who I know that I am,
Mm-hmm.
right? So fitting in says, what do they expect and how can I meet their needs? And as a church planter, that was what was stressed was go into a community, figure out what they do and fit into that. And
Mm-hmm.
that kind of went with my natural, dysfunction or whatever of always needing to fit in
Mm-hmm.
to a group. So,
And you kind of explain that in this chapter. You go
right.
through that. So anyway, keep going.
And
I didn't
I
mean.
didn't look at it ahead of time, so I don't know.
Uh-huh.
But uh, so you always want to fit in. That made me a good church planner because that's the role of a church planner is to blend into a culture and be one of them, and that you
Mm-hmm.
can speak to them, hopefully, and help them sometimes. But fitting in is different from belonging, and fitting in is not always authentic.
Right.
Am I being you got to stop and ask the question, am I being me? Am I being myself? And can they accept me
Mm-hmm.
as I am? They say that just as I am, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's this
Right.
used to be one of my favorite altar call hymns,
Mm-hmm.
just as I am. Can you be that really in a
Mm-hmm.
church? Are you really ever? Right. So those are the kind of
Right.
questions along with fitting in.
Mm-hmm.
But belonging, of course, we talked about that a little bit already, but belonging says I'm okay with myself and
Mm-hmm.
I belong to myself first. And when I'm okay with that,
Mm-hmm.
then I belong everywhere and
Mm-hmm.
no place at all, like
Mm-hmm.
Maya Angelou said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You said in this chapter that not all these things are inherently bad. So we're still in the fitting in
Hmm.
part of this chapter. So not all things are inherently bad, but my desire to fit in sometimes caused me to go down paths that didn't reflect my core understanding of what is ultimately best. Can you elaborate on that? You have an example or
What came to mind when you said that was I have an initial instinct to be benefit of the doubt.
Mhm.
To first, when I notice something um, about someone, I give them a break. Like maybe they're having a bad day, or maybe it was this or whatever. I kind of ask those questions first so that I'm not too judgy, right?
Mhm.
Or whatever I fear. But then that can go too far, where you're just always giving people the benefit of the doubt. You're not being yourself.
Mhm.
You're not really fitting in. You're just appeasing people
Right.
and people pleasing people and stuff
Mhm.
like that.
You kind of mentioned that because you go on to say, I usually preach what they wanted me to preach. I behave the way they wanted me to behave because it was easier to fit into the group than to truly be authentic and live authentically.
Yeah.
And I remember that, we had several conversations before you ultimately decided to leave the ministry. And, there was that real fear of, well, this is how we pay the bills, right? I mean, you're a bivocational pastor, so you did have a job outside of being a pastor, but those two incomes combined, I mean, you're thinking about giving up, I don't know how much it was, a third of your salary or something like that. Um, that, and we had three kid or a couple kids living at home at the time, probably one in college. I mean, I can't remember the time
Yeah.
frame or the timeline exactly, but you're talking about their livelihood as well, not just, whether we could go out to eat,
Hmm.
or get a new car. It really had more to do with just everybody's livelihood. So sometimes that does force people to play the game,
Hmm.
or fit in longer than they want to.
And pastors like to think that they're innovative and they're challenging people and so on, but in reality, when you look back at it, when I look back on my 20 years, I found out I was just within certain guardrails of what they expected me to be. And when I got outside of that, they tend to get upset and they
Hmm.
rally the troops, right? And it happens in every vocation, right? When you go to your job, you blend in, you want
Hmm.
to cause as little trouble as possible. And even if you see yourself as rebellious or innovative or whatever, you still are generally within the framework of what's
Mm,
acceptable
right,
to them.
right. Yeah, I mean, that's very true. And I thought about that while I was reading this chapter is like, well, we all behave a certain way around people.
Mhm.
But, so I guess what is the dividing line, or what is it that causes us to lose that authenticity? How will we know when we're not, when we've lost that authenticity versus, I mean, I'm not going to go to my classroom and be unprofessional and try to be friends with my
Mhm.
students and be sarcastic and tell jokes and stuff like that. I mean, that's knowing the brain structure of students that are 8 and 9. That's just not something I'm going to do. I'm there to serve them as an educator and make sure that they are absolutely ready for the next grade level, not just academically but socially as well. So while outside of that I can be all those silly things, which is a part of my authentic self. you know how do we know when we've taken that fitting in too far, I guess, is what I'm, where we, is it somehow a sense of losing ourselves? Or, I mean, I'm just trying to think, like,
Yeah.
how do we know when
Well,
we've lost part of ourselves by
yeah.
fitting in?
Yeah. Everybody has to behave, right?
Right.
In most cases, to a certain extent, there are times when you need to misbehave, for good cause and
Yeah,
so on.
yeah.
But I think it's all wrapped together in, we say, want to be authentic. Well, that means I need to discover my true self. When I discover that, I discover what are non-negotiables.
Mm,
What is the thing that I really need to stand up for,
hmm.
right? And it's not whether I can wear jeans to
Mm,
work or whatever,
right. Yeah.
it's not those little rules that I go along with because it keeps some order and so on. I can't just go off the map and say I'm going to do whatever I want
Right.
because you're not going to fit in or belong anywhere when you're like, you
Right.
know, we need to learn how to behave. We need to learn how to exist with other people, which
Maybe.
means everybody's not always going to agree on what we should do or how we should act and so on. But what's the line,
Mm,
And some people in politics today don't seem to have a line. It's okay for their side to do one thing and the other side not to. Um, they'll, don't have a problem with ruining someone's life to get
mm,
what they want,
mm.
and those kind of things. So, I mean, authenticity is not as black and white as it sounds, right?
Right.
I'm just going to be real. I said at 50 years old. So, but when I said that, I realized it's not easy.
Yeah,
It's complicated, it's
it is.
complex.
Yeah, it is.
And but did I speak up when I had a chance?
Mm,
Some of the survivors and queer people say, what we need you to do is just when people tell off-color jokes or they joke about mistreating women or
hmm.
whatever, all we want you to do is just say, "Hey, is that necessary?" And those kind of things can be being authentic. I'm
Right.
going to let them know who I am and let them know how this is affecting other people.
Right.
But I don't throw down and say I'll wear what I want to work. I'll act any way I want to. You
Yeah.
can't exist
Hmm.
in a community or society or even a
Hmm.
family like that.
And
You have to
so,
take other people's needs, wants, and desires into
yeah. I mean, if we're going to
account.
coexist,
Yeah,
right? If we're
yeah,
going to coexist.
yeah.
And I think that takes me back to why it's important, that we do have that first half of life, because I think in our family situations and school environments and things like that, we kind of do learn like some social norms and expectations and things like that. I think it's, when our entire existence is dictated by those things and we don't have any, you know, personal freedom, that's when we have to examine, am I really being authentic? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And current administration is a good example of authentically dysfunctional.
Mm,
Because they would say, well, he's authentic, he's real, he just says what he thinks. But um,
At the expense of what?
he is really reacting to everything around him and vowing revenge and so on. So in a way, he's authentic, but in a way, that's not real authenticity. Um, I
When
think,
you try to control
yeah,
others through, yeah.
when you try to make everybody like you or else punish them,
Mm-hmm.
that's a whole different thing than being authentic.
So in our authenticity, we
You
need to
can't
allow
lie.
others to be
Yeah,
authentic as
that's
well.
right. And you can't, I don't think lying is ever authentic. So if you lie about everything you do, then that's not authenticity.
Right. So then the next portion of this chapter you entitled Playing the Game. So first of all, explain what you mean by playing the game, because you've mentioned that a time or two in the previous section on fitting in, but maybe just clarify what that means.
Yeah. So playing the game to me is going along. It's doing what they want you to do. In a church, usually it's keeping everything running, handling when someone has a problem, when someone gets out of line,
Mm,
and so on. You have to you play along with those games. You make the church the top priority, right?
mhm.
So I don't actually know because I don't remember what I said.
Yeah. I mean, I do think it kind of goes back to what you were saying. Like, there are rules, there are situational things that we need to do, go back to my classroom example or whatever. However, um, you know, we can when the rules keep changing, I think you've got to ask yourself, like, why am I
Yeah.
still playing the game if the
Yeah.
rules keep
And it's
changing?
not whether I'm gonna go along with their rules for the game. It eventually becomes, is this even the game that I want to play?
Well, and that
So
goes,
that's
yeah,
why we left religion, right?
yeah.
So that we could play the game the way we wanted to play it, the way that felt more authentic to us.
Hmm.
And like you were mentioning before, you're not always in a situation where you can do that, right? I mean, you you can't just break away from your job, leave your job, which I actually did eventually, right?
Well, yeah,
And it
but
was
it
hard.
wasn't like the first time, you saw things in a different light that you just were like, okay, we're done.
No, it was after
Because
10
there's
years
too
of
many
struggling.
things, especially as an adult, that you have to take into consideration when you have a family and you have, a house payment. And I'm not saying that you should, stay in situations because of that, but I do think they cause you to kind of wake up, and you do need to start doing things to help you get out of that situation, right? So like I would never tell someone to stay in an abusive relationship when you start seeing
Right.
that abusive behavior starting. um I never want people to use the excuse of, well, I don't have any place to go and I don't have, a job and I don't have any resources, because there are resources. You need to reach out to us and we will put you in touch with like resources that we know. I
Yeah.
never want someone to think you have no way out. Um, that's an extreme situation. But yeah,
Mhm.
I think you have to, if it's um, your beliefs are changing in your religion of choice or whatever. Is it beneficial to continue playing the part, playing the game, or do you need to
That
maybe,
someone else is
yeah,
running.
right, that someone else is running? It's really funny that when you said that, I immediately thought of um, last school year and the kickball game. And the entire year, it was just recess was, I almost dreaded it because we had one particular student that just decided when the game wasn't going. I mean, it really reminded me of Donald Trump a lot. But when any game, it could be they were playing football or they were playing kickball or they were playing gaga ball, when it wasn't going this particular student's way, he would change the rules.
Hmm.
Like, and, I am not aware of all the rules of kickball and football and gaga ball and all that kind of stuff. So we actually like said, okay, PE teacher, we got our PE teacher to write down the rules. And also my teaching partner played a lot of sports. So she was able to go, no, you have to, you actually have to tag that person out. We can't change the rules just because you're not winning the game. So anyway, I
Yes.
threw that in because it just really reminded me of it. Like I still have stress just thinking about just recess because it was just a constant struggle for this one student all year long
Yeah.
to understand but it's basically how to lose gracefully, right? We can't always be the winner in the games that we play. And I use air quotes when I say play, but we can't always be the winner. But when you have somebody that's trying to dominate the narrative and the way things are supposed to go just because they don't like something, you got to take a look at that.
Yeah. You've changed the rules and this is bad. It's not working. And everybody thinks it should go this way because that's how we've done it. But again, you're right that those, you don't just go, well, I'm going to chuck everything right now and do something different that seems more authentic to me.
Hmm.
That has to be a measuring of your um, intuition.
Hmm.
It also means listening to guides.
Hmm.
Maybe not the guides you would think of, like probably not your family because they're biased. Probably not your best friend because they're going to take your side. But maybe look for those guides that come along that you weren't expecting. Well, why are they in my life? What can they do to help me with this? And then it's slow, measured movement into the game that we want to play. What fits my personality? What fits my real self?
Hmm.
I did some discovery work and found out I'm a playful, authentic, and mystical. So where is it that I can express myself, and where can I be authentic? And what would that look like for me? And how am I made? How do I react to things and so on? That's a slow movement to a totally different thing, right? So you don't just do that spur of the moment. But like you said, if there's abuse, then that's never okay.
Right.
And we need to move as quickly as we can without putting yourself in harm.
Hmm. Hmm. And like I said, if you are in that situation where abuse is taking place and you feel like you don't have anywhere to go, I mean, please reach out to us and because we have contacts and we will do everything in our power to help you in that situation. So,
I think also a key thing for people is to learn to say no or learn to express their
mm,
feelings, even
mm,
if they don't get their way.
mhm,
Um, to say to someone, I just don't agree with the way we're doing this.
mhm,
And I really don't want to do that. Then I may have to go along with it right now,
mhm.
but it's just sometimes speaking up and
Right.
changing the narrative around things so that other people have a chance to change before we abandon them, right?
Mhm, mhm,
And I think I did a fair amount of that in religion. We get to a certain point, and I would say, we're not doing things right. They don't
mhm.
feel good to me. And sometimes people went along with that, sometimes they didn't.
Right. Right.
And all of our churches, we left. They didn't tell us to leave. But
We
it
didn't make
definitely,
it exactly comfortable for us to
yeah,
stay
definitely made it
either.
uncomfortable
So,
at times.
you know,
And
I
one
mean,
time they did try to get us to leave, but it didn't succeed.
mm,
Yeah.
it's, yeah, side note, they will go to great lengths too. I mean, it's amazing. Like, I remember sitting in our backyard, you know,
Mhm.
and this one couple was talking to us and they kept, basically trying to get us to leave so that their brother could come in and be the pastor. They were doing it in a very roundabout way. And when they
Mhm.
realized that you weren't gonna like just abandon your post or whatever so that their
Mhm.
brother could take over, they hit us with some low blows. And
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, it's amazing the lengths that people will go to. I mean, you really see that side of them. They're trying to be very, I don't even know the word I want to use, but they're trying to be very diplomatic about it,
yeah,
things like that. And then when you are not buying what they're trying to sell you, then they go for the jugular. It's
yeah,
pretty.
indeed.
Mm. I mean, and maybe that's just part of human nature. It doesn't necessarily just have to take place in churches because I've seen it happen in a particular school district not my current school district, but a school district that I was in. Um, when the little nudges weren't working, we went to pulling the rug out from people. So,
Yeah, I think the next part's changing the launch point. I think that you
yeah.
you were getting ready to ask that
Uh-huh.
maybe, but so too many pastors kind of go from one situation to another, and
Mm,
that happened when we were starting churches and so on. That we'd say, well, this is not me. I don't want to do this. I'll do something different. And it ends up being the same thing. Unless I think one thing that helps a lot is working on your mental health,
mm-hmm.
discovering your trauma, dealing with your trauma, and so on. But just um, let's get a new starting place, right? Let's
Mm-hmm.
find the most authentic starting place, and then let's either work towards that or work from that, right?
Mm-hmm.
To not just say I didn't like that and that didn't seem right to me, but I'll start my own thing. But then we don't take care of our mental health. We don't do self-care. We don't take any time off before we start something else.
Mm-hmm.
Pastors are the worst at that. Well, I got to get a following and I got to, be a coach or some kind of advisor, right?
Right.
Even though I don't have any experience in this world yet.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway,
Yeah.
it's a launch point.
Yeah. I think that's important. I mean, I think it's important also, though, to recognize that part of you that like brought you, as I was reading this, I thought, okay, well, what brought Carl into ministry was he just has a passion for sharing what he believes with other people, right? So you get into ministry because that's what you know, right? You're raised in the Southern Baptist convention, that's what you know. So that's what you gravitate towards. And so then when you leave the ministry, you still have that passion to share what you know,
Yeah,
right? So it's easy to
because
kind of fall into that the same, I'm going to use air quotes, the same game, just different equipment, different
hmm
players, right?
different style of music
Right.
or whatever. But I think, the thing for me is that I've been on a lifelong quest to try to understand people and try to figure out, you know, I realized there was a lot of trauma in me or something in me that was kind of messed up and been dysfunctional
Mm-hmm.
in my past. And there's just the words that came out were always, I want to help people. I want to
Mm-hmm.
help, I
Which
want
is a noble
right.
cause and something that we need
I think that's what
more people to do.
most people start in the
Yeah.
ministry is they want to help people. I want to help, just simply help people. And in that, there's a lot of things you have to learn. What makes people tick? Why do they, what happens with trauma? What happens
Mm-hmm.
with the dysfunction in their life? How does that manifest and so on? So it gets kind of complicated,
Mm-hmm.
but then you go through deconstruction, and that's your first thought is how can I help people with deconstruction
Mm-hmm.
right away?
Right. Right.
And so we really, because one of the most common phrases in the desert is for me. We say, for me, this is how I
Mm-hmm.
handled it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to even change that language because it's no longer what God says or the Bible says or pastor says or our denomination believes. It's now what what is right for
For
me.
me, right?
And I know you say that a lot too. When people ask, what do you think about this? What should I do? And you say, for me,
Right.
this is how it played out, and this is what worked best.
Because we're all individuals and we
Yeah.
all have our own stories. And so what worked for me may or may not work for you. I mean, or maybe parts of it will work for you, or,
Hmm.
and you can take what you need and throw away the rest. And that's what I want people to understand about, the books that we write and things like that. These are not here's the 10 steps that you must follow in order for X, Y, and Z to happen, right? It's like we're sharing what's worked for us, and what's worked for other people, but maybe they have just a slightly different, story, or way of thinking, or something that they did that has worked for them.
Hmm.
So yeah, these definitely aren't like manuals that you have to, you have a list that you have to check off.
Yeah.
So, and I like that you end each chapter with questions, because it's hopefully going to cause you to think about your individual life, and how these things reflect in your own life.
Yeah. So we got to answer that question, the PTSD question and deconstruction. Who am I?
Hmm.
Right. And I know so many people out here in the desert that don't know who they are, and so
Hmm.
they're making mistakes, they're stumbling, and so on. But relevance is not really popularity. It's not just selling the most books. It's not just having the biggest website or whatever. It's being who you are.
Hmm.
And to be who you are, you have to find out who you are.
That's true.
Well, I'm a Christian. Well, not all Christians are alike. Well, I'm a plumber.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean anything. That's just
Hmm.
what you do, right? Who are you at your
Hmm.
core? What's really the thing that makes you tick?
Hmm.
Can you express that? Can you live that? Can you design a life based on that?
Hmm.
I'm still going to have to compromise. I'm still going to have to fit
Yeah,
into societies or groups or whatever,
there are norms. Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
But the driving forth launching point should be my true and authentic self,
Hmm. Hmm.
which all kinds of religions, all kinds of spiritualities talk about that, all types of philosophy talk about that, and even Freud and some of them,
Hmm.
the ego and the id and
Yep.
so on.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. Well, this is a good chapter. Lots of good stuff in there. And our next topic is going to be learn to be where you are.
hmm,
So first we have to figure out, what is authentic for me. And then maybe we can find a place
where we can be
where we can be
present.
present,
Yeah.
right? Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, and both those lessons I began to learn from the tea shop, not to just promote a whole bunch of books, but the second book, the tea shop, um, talks about our experience we had in Taiwan
Hmm.
and how that prompted me to pursue those two things, presence and authenticity.
Hmm. Yep.
So check out the books. We're glad that you tuned in. As always, be where you are, be who you are, and be at peace.
Thank you for joining us today on the Desert Sanctuary podcast.
Remember, all who wander in the desert are not lost.
We believe all of our stories are sacred.
We are always here if you need someone to hear your story.
Check out our blog on Pathos and also our YouTube channel.
And stay tuned for our Leaning Forward conference.
Remember, we love you.
And be at peace.